that too. I'm going to change this to content, right? Just to kind of think about where the content goes. And actually what we're going to do is we need to write a handlebars script which goes in the head section of our document to essentially showcase how we can have a template to update content that will go inside of this section. So before we had an H3 with words, let's do this. Let's make this a div with content like that. And then what we'll do is, I forgot all about handlebars, it's been so long. With handlebars, what we need to do is we need to create a script tag in the head section of our document, which in itself is kind of dirty, right? And that gets a, let's give it an ID. We'll call this, stuff template. In here, we're going to create, actually, we can't just do that. We have to give it a type. So it gets a type of text X handlebars template. So handlebars, let's kind of think a little bit about EJS, right? Because we talked about that a minute ago, right? So EJS is handlebars for the backend. Does that make sense? Yeah. Handlebars is a client-side library. Now, one of the reasons that we're using handlebars in this demo today, because we could just do some of the stuff with just jQuery by itself, is to get you thinking about the syntax for this, right? So we'll say H3, we're going to stick with our original convention of words like this. And we're going to put in here, this time what we want to do is we want to show words. So this syntax you see here, history lesson time, this syntax is built off of a couple things. So it started with something called Jinja, then it went to something called mustache, and then now we use handlebars, which uses mustache. And handlebars is actually a type of mustache. Okay? I wrote code for a very long time in another language or version of this, which is only used pretty much in this ecosystem, called Liquid. And Liquid is a version of Jinja and handlebars, which was built for Shopify. So when you write code in Shopify in a template, which you could say like for product in products, and then product ID, and it would look like this kind of. It was just a slight variation of this. That is a templating engine. That's a language to help you with front-end templating. So we know that we're going to have a bunch of products. We could write some logic in the client side to make those products render using a thing like this, right? So just to give you a history lesson, React is going to use this thing too. Now it uses a different version of it, but it's based off of the same underlying principles. Cool? So does AngularJS. It uses that too. It is a clear convention for templates in a user interface, or at least in an HTML document, when you see that convention. So that's something that's been picked up over time. Another thing too, because we're going to write these things all the time, I'm going to refer to those as shark's teeth, because they look like shark's teeth. So when I say shark's teeth, that's what I mean by these brackets. Okay? Just to give you a heads up. All right, so we've got a content area, which we're going to put all of our stuff in, and that content is eventually going to have things like H3 with words. Does that make sense? That's where we're going with this. And we created a, I put H3, that's not H3, it's a div. And I created, oh no, actually started as H3. There we go. Shark's teeth. There you go. You don't really have to call it shark's teeth, but I like that. So we have a template, which means that anytime we update and compile this template, that is going to take it and it's going to insert it or render it somewhere in here. This is kind of getting you thinking back to handlebars land. So now we're going to go into our app.js file, and with our app.js, what we're going to do is basically build out the logic to say when we type on things, we want to update the state of our application in such a way that it is going to utilize handlebars for the updated piece of this. Okay? Let's jump back for a second. And we're going to use some of the logic from before. Let's go into our vanilla demo, right? And let's look at our app.js file. Right? Again, show file is just my custom way of printing this stuff out. I'm just going to copy all this stuff. If this wasn't so large, it'd be easier. Here, make it easy. Yes. Using Vim? No, because I have weird key bindings for Vim. If you want me to open it, like, I mean, I guess here. Actually, not code, sorry. I have custom Vim. So none of y'all are going to have Vim like this. Mine's like super customized. Part of it I have to do all this. And there's weird key bindings for it. But I do have, in Vim, I also have a cursor usage. So if I want, I could actually go through and copy and paste it like that too. So we're going to go here. Sorry, where am I at? Let's close this out. Hold on. We want to go to our vanilla demo. So React intro. We're going to go into vanilla. And all I'm going to do here is just try to utilize the same basic construct that we had built out from before. So we'll grab all this stuff, right? We're going to go into jQuery. We're going to plop this here. Boom. Okay. And we need to start to think about how we're going to update the application given what we've got here. Well, the first thing is handle words, right? Should update state.words. Check this out. First off, this thing we can get rid of, this thing we can get rid of, this thing we can get rid of, and this thing we can get rid of. Because those are using vanilla JavaScript. Does that make sense? Yeah. We're using jQuery, which should allow us to access those things quickly. Here, we're not going to use e.target.value. Let's use a jQuery method, which is like this, and we'll just say this dot value, right? And that means that when we call it, we're going to be calling it a function where we click on something, it refers to the thing we clicked on. There is a difference between jQuery's version of this and JavaScript's version of this. In jQuery, this is the thing that you interact with. Make sense? So we need to write a piece of code here in a minute to interact with it. So let's do it like this. Let's first kind of capture those things that we had up above. We'll say, what do we call it? Clicker? Is that what it's called? Yeah. Let me open, just to make sure. We're going to double check. We have clicker, words input, and content. Okay, so we're going to say clicker. Right? And then here's the thing. We could do this a couple of ways. We're going to use on. Now, just to give you a heads up, jQuery also has a thing that looks like this. Dot click. We don't use that because we want to be able to deal with event delegation in the future. That's the point of this. Okay? So we'll do handle click. We already have that. We just need to refactor some little components of it, right? Or maybe we don't actually. Handle click. No, we don't. Handle click is just updating the state of our words. So we don't even need to update that, right? Should work automatically right out of the gate, right? And then we're going to do word input. And we're going to say dot on change. Now this should work differently with jQuery. At least I hope it will. We'll do handle words. Okay. Now there's another thing we need to do here. We need to go through the steps of working with handlebars. Step 1, grab the template, right? Or I should say, grab the inner HTML, the thing that's from your template. Then you compile it, and then you render it. That's like the idea here. So we're going to say, we'll stick with the same conventions you used in 301. So let source, which is where this thing exists. We could say document.getElement by ID. We could also do this another way. And then we'll say, what do I call it? Stuff template? Yep. Oh, I don't like that. We'll call that handlebars. Just to make it easier to understand. So we'll go back over here. We'll call this handlebars. And again, this is just about you looking at it and being able to reference it, right? And then we need to grab the inner HTML of that. Now there's another way of doing that. We could use jQuery, right, which says this. Zing, right? Get rid of this. And we could say, boom, handlebars, right? Dot HTML. And call it. And that grabs the interior portion of our HTML. Does it make sense? And then we could say, actually, the next thing we need to do is create our template. So handlebars dot compile our template, which is our source, and that's our content, right? And then ultimately, what we need to do is we need to render that. So if we go down to our render, let's get rid of some of this stuff just to make this cleaner, just so nobody gets confused here. Boom, right? And then we have cool, which we don't need. Then we have in our render, this was actually going through and finding element by ID words, and it was trying to update it. We called that, I believe, content. Yep, content. All right. So instead of document.getElementById, let's do what we did up above. Same thing. Boom of content, right? And here we're going to say .html, and we're going to pass our template with our source. Right? And that's going to update the interior content, right? Otherwise, that's all we need to do, right? Because let's think about it. Clicker.onClick will call handle click. Handle click is going to say prevent default, which does nothing. This still is applicable. If it was a form, so let's just get rid of that. Let's get rid of this line. I have like every one of my autocomplete things taken off. That's why I have to do that, by the way. And that, boom. Don't need event. Great. Okay. So handle click, we'll say let's find state.words. That's going to add the words property to our state. It's going to split the word, reverse it, and join it. Same thing we did before, right? Then it's going to call render. Render goes down here and says let's update content, which is going to grab the HTML from our handlebars section, compile it, and create a new thing for us, right? That's all that we have to do. That's it. And actually, let's look at handle words real quick, just so we can discuss that. Words input, which is our input, on change, we'll call handle words. And I'm curious. Yes.
I think we should input state, not source.
Get rid of here. Yes, you're exactly right. It's not we're not compiling the source. We're compiling the state, which then grabs the source of that content here. You're exactly right. So here, let's get rid of this so we can get rid of all these comments. We have these things in the other page. We shouldn't have autocomplete turned off. Okay. So init calls render, which kicks off this whole thing, which updates the state of our application, which initially we set to this, right? And again, this is all about talking about initial state, because in React, we're always going to have an initial state as part of our application, right? That's kind of the idea. And what I want to check, though, I'm curious, this is one just for us, I'm curious if when we do an onChange with jQuery, if that changes any sort of change event. I don't think it does, because it's probably just using the default change. But we're going to say console.log handle words, right? And we're going to say state. Again, I'm just curious if this will do what we want. So then we're going to go in here. We could run live server. You know what? This is just an HTML file that doesn't have a server. So if I really wanted to, I could have done like open in browser, and all of this stuff would have worked that way too, right? Same idea. All live server does for us is, oh, this is vanilla, yeah, right, sorry. All live server does for us is just create a quick server. In fact, if you wanted to, you could just create a quick express server. That's all it is. It's a quick express server, right, that loads an index file. That's literally what it does. So here, we have this thing. Let's console log. Let's make sure we don't have any issues, right? Great. Scroll this down. No words have been added yet. Yeah, it doesn't. Some words, boom, flips them around. Handle words runs on the change. So it does still run on change, which will be on blur. So handle words again. So notice if I do this, handle words still calls. However, the thing that I wish we had access to, we could write a little piece of code to do this if we wanted to, which given time we're not going to. Really, on change in React is every time any of this stuff is changed. It's not just like when I click in or click out, it's literally when I type the letter. Does that make sense? Because we want to make sure that before we submit anything in React, that it's always updating the state of our application. So we're going to write some hooks that will allow that to happen. Okay? We all following? Okay. So that's jQuery land. Now we get to move into React land. So with React, we're going to start this conversation with a couple of layers. All right? First off, there are some tools that you may have heard about in the past.